welcome back to another episode of Paw Patrol with your host, Dr. Jeff Dykes. Tonight I am joined by Dr. David Lin. Thanks for hopping on with me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This is
Absolutely.
great.
So give everyone kind of a quick background of who you are, where you come from, and where you practice.
So I practice out of Southern Maryland. I'm in a precision orthopedics. We're kind of a practice that has like 11 locations. I manage 3 of them for the foot and ankle side.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been a good ride. We used to be a single group with just 3 doctors, and we got bought up. And so I'm practicing with, 11 plus providers on multi-specialty, mostly ortho, some pain docs. It's been really rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay busy that way. I can tell by your social media presence how busy you stay. We'll jump into that here in a little bit. So where did you go to school and residency?
So I went to the California school, the Northern California school, and I went to residency up in ARIA, and now they've been bought by Jefferson, so it's part of the Jefferson hospital system.
In Philadelphia.
Trained under Dr. Justin Fleming, did a lot of trauma stuff with him. And at the time, I think there were when I graduated, there were 7 fellowships available to apply for. I remember I applied to a couple of them. And during my interview, I saw the fellowship director was trying to put this Lisfranc's fracture back together. And at the time, I was like, why is he struggling so much? I could do this. So I decided not to go to fellowship after that. And I just joined an ortho group, and, I just kept going. But now looking back, I think a lot of the companies are looking for fellowship trained surgeons. The landscape's definitely changed for sure.
I agree with you. I mean, I think it's ultimately just mostly confusing to other people because it's so commonplace, especially in orthopedics. You're not going to find anyone who doesn't do a fellowship in something in orthopedics. And then
For sure.
Now if we are a little confused in our own profession of who needs a fellowship, who doesn't need a fellowship, who would benefit from a fellowship, what are the outsiders looking in, how can they be expected to understand the nuances of, well, I didn't need a fellowship, I went to a great residency, or I needed this fellowship, or I just wanted the extra training. It's just so confusing for everyone else. I think it's a bit of a mess, to be honest with you, but it's certainly confusing. So you chose to go directly into an orthopedic group. What would you say to people that are listening that are maybe a little bit younger, the pros and cons of working in an orthopedic group?
You're always going to be the lower guy on the totem pole. I mean, you're a podiatrist, and there's a bunch of other surgeons that they may lord over you, potentially. I was very lucky that the owner of the group and the colleagues I work with, they're very nice to me when I started. When you start out, I thought I was the man, right? You get out of residency, you've done all these surgeries, you think you know everything, and then you get out and you get your first complication, and then that's kind of what determines if you're going to be a really good surgeon down the road, or are you going to you're going to stop right there and you're going to stop doing that type of surgery, right? And so everybody has to go through that. I mean, any surgeon that says they have no complications, they're probably not a surgeon. It doesn't happen.
Right.
We operate on percentages, right? We look at these papers, and if it has a high percentage of success rate, that's what we choose for the patient. You got to think about it. 95% success rate, there's still 5% of failure, right? So
yeah, I mean, someone has to come out either lucky or unlucky. And I tell people all the time, blood clots are very rare, but they do happen. Most people don't think they're going to win the Powerball, but someone does. One of those is a negative, one of those is a positive, but you're right. We do operate on percentages. And so I think it's difficult to manage complications. And you're right. Everyone's going to have complications because you can do the same surgery on 10 different people. 8 of them go fantastic. 1 of them goes okay. And 1 of them is you don't know how to do that surgery, even though the other 8 of them went fantastic. Right. And it's interesting how you respond to that. I think you bring up a good point of how you manage those complications and how you respond to that, because sometimes you get good training in how to manage complications. It depends on how much time you spend in the OR versus how much time you spend in clinic, and how the attendings are responding to those complications. Because like you said, everyone gets complications. But do you feel like you were able to kind of handle those complications? Or what would you say to younger people that are kind of first out and maybe looking to explore new procedures? You know, the landscape is ever changing, but what would you say to the younger people about trying new procedures? Maybe they're a little nervous about having complications.
Yeah. What I say is just find your local rep, right? A lot of them have labs. Go to those labs, practice on the cadavers, use those opportunities to get yourself better,
Yeah.
Most surgeons, like, I do a lot of stuff now that I don't do when I was trained. What I was trained, like just take bunion, for example, like a lot of people are switching to MIS. I never did that in residency.
Right.
But you go to these labs, you learn it, and you get better. And the better you are, the better surgeon you can serve the community better. So my thing is never stop learning. You could be the suckiest surgeon, came out the worst residency. It doesn't matter if you have a drive to incrementally increase your skill set and go to these labs, listen to these talks, read the papers, study, even after residency, you'll get better and you can make an impact.
Yeah, for sure. I think labs are a great option. Obviously, cadaver is preferred, but not always available. Sawbones are okay. And at least sawbones, you can get an understanding of the technology, how it functions, how it works, because, someone's always bringing me a new jig, a new this, a new clamp, oh, you got to try this thing. It's like, I don't know.
I know you're
Maybe
anti-jig.
I am anti-jig. It's weird. I'm anti-jig kind of, because sometimes you have to use a
Sure.
jig. Like when I use a fibular nail and I want to put the cross locks in, it'd be stupid not to use the jig, because otherwise I'm freehanding it, trying to do perfect circles, and like you're just wasting time. Like, yeah, just use the jig. It's easier.
Sure.
But I have a little bit of a jig issue, mostly because this is a little bit controversial. It's a lot of bit controversial. It opens up a surgery to people who maybe shouldn't be doing that surgery. And the jig is the assistive device that gets them to take the leap from, I'm not trained in that procedure. Oh yeah, you can do it. Just use this jig. And you're like, I don't think that's a great leap for us to be making here. Like, you're missing the 6 steps in between where you actually understand how to do it. In case the jig falls on the floor, the jig is letting you skip all those steps. It just makes me a little bit nervous. And I've seen train wreck after train wreck. Not a jig fan. You're right.
But what about you have these residency, residents get their numbers and they come out and they graduate them. Who determines that they get to do surgery or not, just based on a degree? Does that make sense? Like, there's that whole aspect there.
I don't have a great answer for that. I mean, I certainly know residents who graduated and were fully competent. And I know residents who graduated and were, what do they call it? Minimum competency, right? Like, did you hurdle the
Sure.
lowest bar to graduate? Yes, you did. But that doesn't mean you should be taking on complex reconstructions or total ankles or some, like, it's a weird thing that we just say, like, yep, you graduated. And then it's almost like self-limiting at that point to understand your limitations. And some people do and some people don't. There are certain surgeries where I'm like, that's just not for me. I don't want to tackle that. Like, the logistics of it just aren't feasible for me. But I don't know that some people understand their limitations and they get pushed by a rep or a company or whatever to say, like, oh yeah, you can do that. Oh yeah, you're good. You can do this. Here's how it works. Just slippery slope from my standpoint, because ultimately we're all representatives of each other. We don't really realize it, but when you put your x-rays out there and you go and you interact with other people, or you do a surgery and then they walk into someone else's office, we're all representatives of each other. And so if some people are out there doing surgeries that they aren't 100% fantastic at because they got talked into by a company or a certain technology, that I definitely am not a big fan of. It's not necessarily the jig itself. The idea of a jig makes sense. It just makes things simpler. It's easy. It's streamlined. It's who's using the jig in what situation that I have more of an issue with.
So what do you think about robotic surgery?
That's interesting. So are you talking about, so let's take that down 2 different paths. So there's robotic assisted, right? Like in certain cases where there's someone operating the robot, versus a robot doing the surgery. Like we have automated cars, and eventually there's going to be automated factories that we already have. Like if you look at the Amazon factory where the robots go to the aisle, go up, pull the thing, put it down, bring it back over here. Like they're doing half the work or more.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting. So I don't have any experience with obviously either of those, but the robotic assisted surgery, what do you think the benefits of the robotic, like when someone uses a quote unquote robot, it's, and they're sitting in the room, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about this, right? Like, so, I'm not here to promote a company or not, but I'm just gonna, if you're okay with it, I'm gonna name the company and I'm gonna tell you
Yeah,
what
I'll bill them.
the
That's fine.
product is. And
They'll get a bill. Yeah, it's fine.
okay. So I recently, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, I posted this, like, I went to an Exact Tech event, right? They're showing me their new total ankle with their GPS system. And I
Mhm.
don't know if you're familiar with it,
Mm-mm.
but essentially they have this infrared device on the top, and you put two sensors in the foot and the ankle. So one in the tibia, one in the foot somewhere. I think it's talus. So you upload the CT scan onto this infrared camera computer thing, and basically you map out the foot. And then if you move the foot, you can see it on the screen that the whole CT scan's there, the 3D model, and it'll move with you.
Hmm.
So that technically, right now they're not advertising this, but technically you can do the surgery without C-arm.
Hmm.
So, I mean, that's assisted as well, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, taking jig to another level, but like that kind of technology, I think can change the way we approach surgery, right? It might speed up the time, increase the accuracy.
Yeah. Very much so.
So stuff like that. But I'm not trying to say, jig or no jig. I think, to me, they're all like kind of like toys. They're fun to play with, and if I don't like them, I don't like them, right? And there are bad jigs out there, they're good ones, but
Yeah.
um, I'm not anti or I'm not for. I'm just like, if this can help me, I'll use it, right?
I think that's a very reasonable approach. And I'm always for the betterment of whatever it may be. In this case, we're talking about surgery, but I'm always for the betterment of everything. If it makes the surgery safer, more reliable, better patient outcomes, you can do it via a minimally invasive approach. There are very reasonable things that are assistive devices to us in the OR. And I'm completely on board with all of that stuff. Do you see a day where we can train a robot to perform certain surgeries?
I think so.
We're
I
going to
mean,
look
with
dumb
AI
in like 50
technology,
years when they pull this
yeah,
footage out of the catacombs. They're going to be like, look at these
yeah,
idiots. They didn't think robots could do surgery. Like, you see a robot doing a backflip now. You see all these, like, they have like a robot dog that runs around. I
yeah,
mean, it's like unbelievable the advancements in technology in just the
yeah.
last 10, 15 years. It'd be a little
So for surgeons to have job security, we should stop the movement.
yeah.
Is that,
Shut
yeah,
down, what is it, Boston Scientific and
yeah.
their dog robot? Yeah, we got to shut them down because they're coming for our jobs. And it's funny because when you look at all the studies about AI,
Yeah,
people prefer the AI. They feel that the AI is more compassionate because the AI didn't oversleep, forget their coffee, get in a divorce, got cut off in
sure.
traffic. Like AI
Yeah,
doesn't care about any of that stuff. It's really interesting that people
yeah.
prefer AI to actual humans.
You know what's funny? Because I type out my business proposal based on the AI. So I'll go on ChatGPT and I'll type up like, give me a business proposal. It'll come out with all these segments, and I just use what I need and I edit it, and then that's
Yeah.
my business proposal. I think a lot of people are doing stuff like that. Like, you want to search up. I think it's great, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it makes us dumber.
It does. It's like using a calculator instead of
Yeah,
understanding long division. At some point, someone has to understand long division. Like, you can't
right.
just have no humans that know how to do the thing, right?
Exactly.
I agree with you.
Exactly.
It's
I
making
do
us
miss
dumb
the
and lazy.
I do miss the days like when Google wasn't so AI focused. I can search on the internet and I can go through all these little sites and figure out what things are, you know?
Mhm.
And now they've taken all the stuff out and then they just use AI to tell you what the answer is. What if they mess with the AI data and the AI comes out and the answer is completely what they want you to think,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It's a slippery slope too. And we always imagine AI in the hands of people who intend to use it for good. But I'm sure there are people who do not intend it to use it for good that are working on AI to do whatever they want to do, whether it be computer viruses or trying to hack things that I don't even understand. But yeah, I mean, AI,
right,
there's going to be pros and cons for sure. There's going to be benefits and some big negatives at some point in the future.
right, right, right.
So let's talk to people about how you and I met, which is through an app called 15Blades. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell everyone about 15Blades, how it came to be and what it is?
So 15 Blade kind of was created based on just an idea of putting video and cases on a social media platform. And it's been done before in IG. I mean, but like what we're trying to do is keep it short form for the most part. Surgeons are so busy, residents are very busy. You're doing a case and you're on to your next. You got to do your dictations and then, so in between cases, a lot of times, especially in private practice, you don't have a lot of time to read these articles and kind of get updated. So we want to create something where the community can share their cases, their thought processes, some of the talks they did for other companies or act fast or whatever. Um, and kind of summarize it into like a short form. Now, AI can do that, but I prefer genuine human being if possible. So if you're doing a case, you're like, cool, I found out I could use this drill for this and it works really well. You
Mhm.
post it on there and I'm just scrolling through it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to use this next time on my next case. And
Yeah.
then within a minute, you get that knowledge and you're on to your next thing and you can turn off the app, do whatever. Right. So that's the kind of the and originally that was just an idea. And I was talking to one of my reps at the time, and she's like, I actually know someone who can develop this for you if you want. And then so that's literally that question started the whole thing. And
Hmm.
so it was a cascade of events. And I remember when we were applying for the LLC, I was thinking to myself, I was like, all right, I'm going to put X amount of money down and open this bank account and start this LLC. This is like the crossroads, right?
Hmm.
Like I can either say, nah, I don't want to do it and then just call it a day. Or I could say I could do it and then just kind of tackle this, you know, Godzilla size project. Right.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, like, if I don't at least try, I'm going to always think to myself, what if I did? And you only live once. So, I talked to my wife and basically I was like, you know what, let's just do it.
Hmm.
And so here I am a year later.
Yeah. So tell
So,
people who it's open to, because I think that's the best part of this. It's not open to the public. Who can sign
right.
up for it?
So mostly if you are a student or if you have an MPI number, you can sign on to this thing. And we're open to international physicians as well now. And so they can kind of upload their physician ID just to prove that they're a doctor. And then we'll approve them from our end. And then they get full access that way.
So basically, you have to be in medicine at some point.
Yes.
You can't just
Yes.
be the general public. So that's
Right.
where I find a lot of benefit if there's a case that maybe didn't go that well, or a very complicated case, or you just have some questions and you're like, what would you guys do with this? I think that's the
Right.
best place to throw that up because it's not being reposted and shared and seen by
Right.
the general public. It's kind of hidden behind this wall of, it's almost like if you're at a conference and you're able to, like, you know how you go to a conference and someone lectures and then people ask questions like, well, I've got this guy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how many people are gonna like tell their story
Right.
about their one patient that we're gonna have to hear the whole history? And so this is
Right.
the platform for that. Like, well, get
Yeah.
on there, throw your case, throw up your x-rays,
Right.
ask your question, get some
Right.
responses to that. That's where I
Yeah.
think it really has utility.
The one thing is like we talked to a HIPAA lawyer for about like a 2-hour conversation about this, and we are HIPAA compliant. Like these companies, they come out with new standards every year to say they're HIPAA compliant,
Hmm.
but even with what we have, we're HIPAA compliant. So you can't screenshot anything on there.
Hmm.
Like you've tried a screenshot, it gives you a white blank screen. Nobody, unless you are a VIP or investor or something, can log on and look at this stuff. And the reason we kept it private is to protect surgeons. Honestly, we want to create like a safe space for them so that when they're up there, they're throwing out their bad cases or whatever to talk about it. Like it's a community that is trying to help each other get better. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the gist of it to start. There are definitely a lot of future plans that I can't reveal right now, but like we're definitely pivoting to a different direction. The old stuff will still be there and it'll still be free, but there's going to be other stuff coming. So
Cool.
stay tuned.
Stay tuned, everyone. I want to talk for a minute how you take the idea in your head and make it a reality, because I think it's a really interesting process. So, can you take us in a little more detail of you have the idea, you had a rep who said they can help develop that, but then you start reaching out to an app developer and start
Sure.
formulating. It's kind of like when you build a house. You're like, yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
great. And then by the time you get done, you're like, oh my, don't ask me any more questions. Put the light switch where the light switch goes. Put the
Yeah.
outlets where the outlets go. I don't want to
Right.
tell you how many inches from this wall or how many, just do it.
Yeah.
So tell us about kind of the behind the scenes of
Uh,
developing the app.
I mean, there's so much things I could say about it. I'm almost getting like a DDoS attack or something. I'm just like, I can't. A lot of thoughts come to mind. But just from the beginning, right? Like, I mean, you start out with an idea, right? And then you say, how can I implement it? You draw it a brainstorm. You have like, okay, task 1, task 2, task 3, and then you just kind of keep going. You talk with your developer, and usually what happens is you have like a weekly meeting with them, and then like, you tell them the plans, and there's a roadmap, and then you just, they develop it, you approve it, they develop it, you approve it, and it's this lengthy, consistent process that you have to show up every week and get it done. Details like, where do you put your notification button? What's the font you want? Is it Arial font or Helvetica? What size of the font you want? Oh, wait, this surgeon can't see in their phone. The font's too small. Can you enlarge it? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So little things like that make a difference because it's the whole user experience, right? Now you can keep making this better and better and better forever, right? Because there's always imperfections that I, as a creator, I see, right? And I like this needs this needs. So you keep adding to the roadmap and the costs add up. Then you got to go raise funds. When the cost goes up, you raise funds. You got another idea. You want to put, I don't know, I'm just throwing out there AI in this thing, right? For a certain thing that you want to add to this thing, you're gonna have to like find an AI engineer developer, right? What if your developer doesn't work out?
Yeah.
And that has happened to me once already. They originally were doing well, and then halfway through the process, things just kind of, the production slowed down. We were still paying the guy, and finally we said, that's enough. It's been 3 months. We didn't see anything. Let's cut you off. Let's move on to another person. And we had to go hunt. So I remember, when was that Act Fast? I was in LA 2 years ago, a year ago.
Yeah, I think it was Tampa most recently, and then LA was
Yeah, so
before
2
that,
years
maybe.
ago. So I was out there. I went to some of the lectures, but half the time I was hunting for a developer. So I interviewed like 1 or 2 developers in LA. And then after the conference, I flew to San Francisco and I interviewed a bunch of developers up there as well. And then finally we settled on a developer near my backyard in Baltimore. But these little things that you do for your company that you thought you would never do because you have a job, you have a wife, you have kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
a lot of time and effort that goes into it.
Right.
Why don't you talk a little bit about some of the video podcasts, some of the webinar stuff that you guys have been doing over there?
So the original idea was like just to kind of drive eyeballs, and everybody's doing podcasts. So we're like, oh, why don't we do one too? And so, it's non-sponsored. It's just like a very genuine talk. Like, what do you truly think about this procedure or that procedure? What do you do? And because we signed on a lot of curators to help out with our, posts and stuff, a lot of them are big names like Bob Anderson, Justin Fleming. We have, Kadakia up there, Dimitriopoulos, like these like big names in the total ankle world and the trauma world and the sports medicine world. And then we have Raquel, she's really good at the limb salvage stuff, orthoplastic. But we have all these people, and we're like, why don't we just get them on a podcast? We pay them, and we were paying them out of our own pocket without industry sponsorship, just to kind of drive some eyeballs. And so it's been working out well. And then nowadays, like, we're thinking maybe we should monetize our webinar because, each webinar I post, it's funny because I'll post it on LinkedIn or I'll post it on IG. I'll get 3,000 views on them. It's weird.
Yeah.
Like, you see the impression. It's like there's a lot of people who actually look through this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's funny, even though we got that many views on LinkedIn or IG, our user count right now is only 2,000 for the platform itself. So we're still very tiny. We're not huge at all, but our social impact is larger So 15 Blade has become more a brand that owns a platform instead of a platform is 15 Blades.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's difficult to market, I think, because, and I found that a little bit with my podcast here, is that the people that you have access to market already know about you, right? And
Yeah.
so the people that already follow me already know about it. So it's hard to broaden that out to a new audience. Where am I reaching this audience? Unless you put on what are they, like a bill? What are those called? Where the people wear like the billboard, or they have like the spinny sign. You need to go to ActFast and get like a 15 liter. Oh, that's what you need to do. Get like a big cardboard cutout 15 blade, literally like a big 15 blade, and spin it around, and then get out there and start promoting.
If your name gets out there, great. But I think the quality of content is what you really want, right? Like you don't want some watered down content that's out there. Like just, if you have good content, people are going to come on and they're going to listen to you. I really feel like, people who really are hungry for this kind of stuff, you put out a good quality content, they'll flock to you. You don't have to fight it. It'll come.
Yeah, and that's true of your webinars that you're doing. I think that eventually you put enough content out there, then it's going to drive people to the platform, and then other people will tell someone else about it, and you get the natural growth that way. So,
right.
It's
organic
tricky,
growth
though.
is better.
It is better. It's interesting. Like sometimes on Instagram, I'll see people with like 15, 20,000 followers, and I'm like, what? I never heard of you. And then you can always check that, the cheat code on Instagram, you go to the reels and you see how many views they get. And if it's nowhere absolutely near the number of followers, then they paid for the followers. So
that's probably true.
It's crazy. But point of that is organic growth is so much better because it's they're real people. That's what you want on your platform, is real people. Yours is a little different. It's not a social media platform. I mean, it's not
it kind of
different.
is. I don't want to deny that, but
it's not that different.
Social media just comes with like a kind of like a It comes with baggage.
Nerd. It's for dorks. It's for It's a nerdy social media platform. Hey, y'all want to talk about feet? Yep.
Yeah.
Come on over.
The funny thing is, like one of the comments that kind of I got from one of my buddies. He's a vascular surgeon, and he basically says like, who wants to come on a platform after work to look at work?
Yeah. That's a good point.
I was like, I mean, you're right. But I mean, residents,
people do,
they would
because
do it. They're hungry, they'll do it.
Yeah, especially when you're interested in learning, or like I said, if you have a tricky case or you want to pick up some tips, you get on there and you're like, oh, that's fantastic. Or maybe they show you the latest and greatest jig that you didn't even know about, that then you got to try it.
Right.
You got to start charging these people, because you're in it. You're advertising for them for free when you post some of these cases on there. So speaking of that, let's jump into some cases. You want to do that? All right. Can you see that?
You even got my name on there. What?
Yeah, we're going big time. All right. So this is a case that you had shared on 15 Blades. So we're giving people a little sampler platter of what 15 Blades is like, but this is a case that you shared on there. Why don't you kind of give us a little bit of rundown on this case here, because it's super interesting.
Yeah, so this patient, this was like a couple years ago. So he was carrying someone and fell down the stairs. He was still successfully able to get the patient onto the ambulance, but he had to get his ankle treated. And when we got a MRI, this is what his ankle looked like after being treated by another surgeon for, I want to say, a year.
What did that other surgeon do? Do you know?
They did arthroscopy. I mean, they obviously did the conservative stuff, but then I think they did an arthroscopy, and finally he just decided to leave that surgeon, and I happened to be around. So
for anyone just listening, we have a large cystic osteochondral defect in the medial talar dome right next to the shoulder of the medial talus. So anytime and it's quite posterior. So Those are two very, very tricky things when you see an MRI and the lesion is posterior. That makes me nervous because I always want to do an anterior ankle arthroscopy. And when it's posterior, it's harder to get to, it's harder to access with the tools. And number two, when it involves the shoulder, it makes me a lot more nervous because when you start treating these, sometimes the stability once you've debrided at the shoulder is a lot less than if you have kind of what I tell patients is like a pothole in the middle of the talus. It's going to be easier because you have 360 degrees circumferentially around the lesion to hold whatever graft you're going to put in there, versus if a chunk of the curb falls off, there's nothing that's going to hold the repair. It's just going to fall into the street. So what are your thoughts when you see an MRI like this?
Joint destructive procedure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, right? Because, I mean, it helps to make that decision because the other physician has basically tried some of the other things that you might
Right.
jump to, whether it's microfracture or minced juvenile cartilage or even an Oates procedure, something like that, that you would try as joint sparing procedure. You know, some of those things go out
Yeah.
the window.
Yeah.
So
I just
what was your plan versus, you know, total ankle versus an Oates or a like a fresh frozen talus, try to match it with a CT scan, something like that. What were your thoughts before you chose to go down the path you did?
so I remember this one. So she came to me. I had a conference to go to, so I left, and I left her with my partner. So my partner said, "You know what? Since he's not going to be back, so what we're going to do is we're going to inject your ankle." So she injected her ankle with cortisone, and she came back and she was like, "This hurts more than ever. Like I can't do this. Like this is bad."
Hmm.
And so I said, "You know what? Let me, if you're okay with it, let me put a scope in you just so I can see what's going on in there." And then when I did the scope, her entire talar dome cartilage was lifted off.
Hmm.
It was just floating there. But at that point, I was like, you either need a total ankle or you need a total talus.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of it is just, I know the cyst is big, but if you look at that side, it goes all the way to her subtalar joint.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
pretty all encompassing, especially that top middle picture there when you see the cystic changes, definitely, and then the
yeah,
edema within the entire talus. It's almost like becoming somewhat avascular you worry about with cystic change, and you see the edema encompassing the entire talar body as well.
yep. And we put in a total talus in her. I put in so when they do total talus, is what happens is you do bilateral scans just
Mm-hmm.
to see what the other side is, and they invert it and they put it in this one. And they do it in 3 different sizes. At least back then, that's what they did. Um, and so you either get 95%, 100%, or 85% nominal. We put the sizer in, and I decided like, oh, it was very tight, so I just put in 85% because
Mm-hmm.
that was on the table. That's what it felt like.
So you're
And
doing
so
an
I put it
anterior approach for this.
anterior approach. You go in and you just chisel out into multiple pieces the talus.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's a picture of that lifted off. I guess it's not in there, but they just took a picture of the big chunks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but literally, I just took a ronger and you could just take out this disc of
Jeez,
cartilage. I remember
that's
that case. That was the only case I ever had to do that. I took it out and just like this disc of cartilage just came out, and I was like, "This is not salvageable."
yeah.
Once this total talus is in, and I don't know if I posted. This was posted such a long time ago. I don't know if I posted this, but this patient, I started weight bearing her because nothing was fused, right? So I started weight bearing her at week 4, I believe, once the
Mm-hmm.
stitches are out.
Mm-hmm.
So she was walking, she was fine. And then 2 months out, she came back to see me and she was like, "My foot hurts like crazy. I don't know what happened. What'd you do? Da 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 da." My friend had a total ankle and she had it around the same time I did, and she's feeling great.
Mm-hmm.
And so you must have done something wrong, da 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 da. So I took an X-ray of her foot, and I don't know if I presented it on the 15 blades, but she had a nutcracker fracture in her navicular.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what happened was because I put in a nominal, the total talus was pistoning back and forth when she was walking because
Mhm.
in 4 weeks it hadn't scarred in properly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when she was walking, it was pistoning and it caused a nutcracker fracture. So I said, "Oh, you have a fracture here. Let's go ahead and just put you in a boot and let it heal. And 6 weeks later, you can come out of the boot." 6 weeks later, the nutcracker fracture healed. She was able to walk without pain, and she's back to doing EMT now. So,
That's a tough one. I mean, this makes you pucker a little bit when you start ripping out the talus because there's no going back. When you start cutting that, cut the talar neck, cut the talar body, like start pulling out chunks of talus, you've crossed a bridge that you can't go back. And so then you hope
yeah.
that, you know, the sizers fit and the pieces are correct. But yeah, this is a really interesting case, I think. So
Yeah, I think they're getting more and more popular now. I always try to save as much bone as I can. I wouldn't recommend this if they can get a total ankle. I would save as much bone as possible.
right.
I know total ankles are. I mean, this looks fancy, but it's actually the procedure is so easy. It took
Mm-hmm.
me less than an hour to get this done.
Yeah.
I mean, you pull it out, you stuff it in, you're done. You close it,
Right.
right? Versus a total ankle, you're doing measurements. You're making sure your slope is good. Your angle, your inversion, eversion is good. There's a lot of measurement that takes place with a total ankle, even with PSI.
Yeah. So would you think about doing this case again in this situation? Would you go up to a 95%? Would you stick with the 80, stick with the smaller and do a longer non-weight bearing period until it's scarred in more? What do you think you would do differently in the future?
I think I probably do still do an 85 because I remember when I was stuffing that 95, just very tight.
I mean, it
And I
looks like
didn't
it
want
fits
to,
perfectly now.
yeah,
Like
I
I
didn't
can't
want to
imagine anything
overstuff her
bigger than
ankle.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I would do is I probably just non-weight bear her a little bit longer and let her scar in a lot more
Sure.
before I like let her loose.
Right.
Um, and that's probably the only difference I would do. But you got to account for like she's also an EMT. She's like on her foot all the time
Mm-hmm.
versus like some guys, they're more sedentary. So
Yeah. I can imagine a patient like this because I know some people, I bet, that are very similar that want to go, go, go. You know, you tell them, hey,
yeah,
take it easy, and they don't have that button. They don't have that ability. They're going to try to push the limits of what their body can do as early as they can do. I'm not blaming the patient or anything like that, but, you know,
it's
sometimes
just their
it's just,
mindset.
yeah, they
The
just got to
people who
go,
do
go.
CrossFit, work through the pain. 10 reps is 10 reps.
Yeah. I'll be on the couch. See you guys when you're done. Have a good workout. I'll be
Yeah,
over here. So, all right, let's move on to this next case here.
sure.
So this is an MIS approach to a first MPJ fusion. So what are your thought processes when you look at an first MPJ fusion? And I'll skip forward so you can remember what it was. It's this one here. So
Can
when
I
you
say the
start,
name of the company?
yeah.
It's a Forma Medical. Yeah.
So when you start thinking about doing an MIS approach to a first MPJ fusion, what is your thought process between choosing an MIS versus an open? Because the open is very reliable. We've all done 10,000 open.
Sure.
First MPJ fusions don't typically have incisional healing issues. Maybe once in a blue moon I've had some, but pretty reliable healing even with an open
Yeah.
approach. But what is your thought process there?
I practice in the country, so people kind of don't take care of themselves as much. And so the smaller incision I can make a patient, the better, especially if the patient's slightly more elderly. They don't really want to listen to what you tell them to do. MIS is great for that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is for my MIS surgeries, the small incisions, I close with just absorbables now. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't even have to take out the stitches, like,
Sure.
saves the patient more pain. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so that's the reason. Um, Now, everybody, at least nowadays, I hope know that there are studies out there that compare cross screws versus a plate and a screw. Like the construct, the plate and the screw is stronger, right? It's a better construct. Um, with MIS, I think when it was developed for MIS fusion, most people were just doing cross screws, right?
Hmm.
And so this company came out with a great idea to put a plate across. And essentially, the technique is just a meeple technique.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you fix a tibia fracture or a pylon. You don't want to open the huge incision. You just want to slide the plate up there, and you just open nick incisions to put in your screws. It's the same technique. You just use it in the foot.
Hmm.
And I have not done an MIS with a plate on except for this one.
Hmm.
At some point in the future, I'll probably post something on it because I have a bunch of fusions coming up. So,
What's your
um,
approach here for the, obviously on the left, we're looking at you finding the joint and then
sure.
inserting the MIS burr. Do you use two portals or one when you're prepping the joint?
So it depends on the foot size, right? So if my burr can reach the other side, sometimes one portal is enough, and I've
Hmm.
done it like that before. Most of the time, I do two portals. So I'll put one portal just lateral to the EHL.
Hmm.
Um, that way you kind of avoid the nerve, and you avoid the EHL semi, and then the
Hmm.
other portal is exactly where you see it. It's the midline of the first ray and right at the joint at that cross junction.
Yeah, I like that approach too. I like that for two reasons. Number one, you can get access to the entire joint. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, I like having two portals when I do MIS because I can always flush through one and get all the stuff that
Yeah,
pops out through the other one. I think it gets a cleaner joint, gets all the junk out of there
right.
once you're done prepping.
So the one thing about flushing the joint is, I think back then it was just kind of innately like you just flush the joint. But I
Hmm.
think some of the newer studies or some of the surgeons are saying that you actually don't want to flush it. You want to leave the bone goo in there because they fill out all the nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I have been not flushing as much as I used to, and I do see a better result. People heal faster, just because it's like your bone graft. It's just in there.
Yeah. It just
I
makes me
know
nervous
there's
to
gonna,
leave chunks of cartilage in there that
yeah,
are going to prevent bone to bone apposition. And
right.
so sometimes I'll take the cartilage out, I'll flush it out, and then squirt a little DBM in there to fill all the
Oh,
nooks and
okay,
crannies.
yeah, I've done
Similar
that before
concept.
too. But the one thing you can use MIS jig to fenestrate, which is what I love the most.
Yeah, like decompresses. And sometimes these joints are kind of sclerotic. The bone at the joint. It'd be one thing if you were going to fuse a normal first MPJ. Obviously, we'd never do that. It makes no sense.
Right.
But in a normal joint, the cartilage would be pristine and you'd have pretty soft subchondral bone. But sometimes in these cases, that subchondral bone is so sclerotic and so hard that you're right. And when I do an open approach, I definitely fenestrate. And so sometimes I'll stick a little curved awl in there and
Hmm.
mallet and try to fenestrate the joint, which
Yeah.
is, I think, very helpful for, arthrodesis and healing from that standpoint. So
Right.
when you prep a first MPJ specifically, so I think there's a pretty big distinction in doing a first MPJ fusion versus an MIS lapidus. We can ignore the MIS lapidus, but if you just picture the shape of the first TMT versus the shape of the first MPJ, one's round, one's flatter, it's much
Sure.
easier to prep a flat joint. Are you trying to get flat end to end when you're prepping, or are you trying to maintain the curvature of the joint when you're prepping a first MPJ?
I try to maintain the curvature.
Yeah, I do
I
too, and it's
mean,
tricky.
yeah, it is. But um, I find it's doable. The problem with the MIS one is like if you have a person that's osteopenic, um, you can get in trouble pretty quickly
Yeah,
if you're not very careful about getting floral to kind of check where you are.
I agree with you.
Um,
If they have
so I would
subchondral cyst, that bone can be very soft.
exactly. I've almost got myself in trouble a couple times with osteopenic patients. So nowadays, I'll take a lot of florals to start just to see how the bone quality is,
Hmm.
and then if I'm very comfortable, then I'll kind of lay off the floral for a little bit. So
Yeah, I think the hardest part to prep, in my experience, is the plantar middle midline of the joint. So you're coming in kind of medial and then you're coming in like dorsal lateral. I think it's hard because that there's a curvature, the concavity of the
yeah,
proximal phalanx. It's hard to get in the center of that, and it's hard to get to the center inferior most
right.
aspect of the proximal phalanx is my
Do you scope yours?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
I'm not good enough to scope a first MPJ.
For me, it's like there's so much bone putty in there that what are you scoping? You're not going to see anything, at
Yeah.
least unless you flush it out. And I don't want to flush it out. So,
Yeah. I just prep. I mean, if you do enough MIS with the MIS burr, you get a pretty good feel of the difference in resection of cartilage versus bone. And you can
yep.
hear it and you can feel it and you can find little spots as you're going like, oh, I can still feel that one's not done. Oh, over here is not quite done yet.
Yeah.
And you get pretty confident. But when you're done and saying like, yeah, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. There's a tactile thing.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah.
It's interesting because I don't feel that way with, let me back up. I don't feel that way with a burr on a just a handheld versus like the MIS burr system. I don't feel that way with a burr on a handheld, but you do feel it. A good example would be when you're using a curette, right? When you're scraping a joint
Yeah.
and you're feeling that curette, it has a feel, it has a sound, it has just a distinction to it. And when you're done, it feels completely different when you get down to the subchondral bone. So if you use the MIS burr enough, you can tell when you have done what you intended to do, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It's experience.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so this is the jig that is used to. I'm saying that jokingly.
The word you should not say.
No, I mean, like I said, there are jigs that are helpful to surgeons, and in this case, like this is just speeding you up. Could you do little incisions and freehand and find the holes? Yes,
Oh,
but
for
this
sure.
is just going to speed you up. So
Yeah.
you're sliding the plate through an incision and getting it down to bone.
Right.
So this is the jig that goes over top and you slide the plate underneath and then you fill with the screws and you get a crossing screw. And this is you, or at least
Yeah.
what you posted. Maybe you found it on the internet. I don't know. I assume it's you prepping the joint. And then you line up that plate and that crossing wire there. So
Yep.
it seems pretty straightforward, but it's an interesting concept to be able to put a plate in, like you said.
Yeah.
If you think about the axial loading forces of the first MPJ, when you do push off, the forces are going to be wanting to dorsiflex the toe.
Right.
And it makes sense that a dorsally applied plate is going to resist the dorsiflexory forces of the first MPJ.
Right.
But, I've had pretty good success with crossing screws. I've recently done a case where I used 3. I stacked up 2 parallel
I
screws.
did see that.
And then I put a crossing one out. It was almost like I copied the people who do the MIS head with the parallel screws. I was like, why couldn't we just shift that up to the first MPJ and then put a dorsal in the opposite direction? And that seems to go pretty well. But
do you use 3-5 screws or use 4-0?
I use all different kinds. I try to use 4.0. It makes me nervous anytime I use a 3.0 or a 3.5. I just not as much 3.5, but it makes me nervous when I use a 3.0. It just doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah.
I think on that one I used 2 4.0s and then a 3.0. I think I used a couple.
Yeah, I mean that was I really like that construct that you put up there. For a smaller joint, maybe not enough real estate, I'm guessing.
Exactly. That's the point, is like you start to run out of place to put screws.
The reason I like 4.0s is because the guide pins are so easy to put in the direction where you want it to.
Yes.
The 3.5 guide pins and the 3.0 guide pins, they're like doo-doo. Like
I 100% agree with you.
I hate
that
them.
thing just like bends. It just doesn't go where you want it to go.
Yeah.
And then you use the other guide pin. You're like, oh, that was easy. It's like night and day different. I completely agree with you.
And then for me, if I were to do this again, I probably would just do a locking tower and just slide it in and then just meeple it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't use the jig at all. I think most surgeons are probably good enough to just put that in and then, have that guide pin in there and do all that. The one thing is these plates, I wonder if, I guess you can slide in one with a oblong compression hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the next thing that I really want to do with different plates instead of using a industry made stuff. Just get like a regular plate, 1/3 tubular or something that's readily available, and do it that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you could probably make a small incision midway between these 2 screw holes and another small incision right here, and you could just it's not a deep dark hole like sometimes when you're fixing some things. This is like
skin and bones.
Yeah, right. Just get the extensor tendon out of the way, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you could get pretty good access to that to put a locking tower in there. I agree with you.
Right.
So
also, the extensor tendon is going to be negated.
yeah, true.
After the fusion,
Maybe I'll put my screw right through it.
It'll help with TMTJ dorsiflexion. I mean,
there you go. There you go. Maintain some mobility here. So these are your incisions afterwards, and yeah, I mean, I think that looks great. I mean, a good construct there, and good alignment. So yeah, like you said, maybe would be interesting to have one with like an oblong hole and get a little bit of axial compression through that plate if you're going to use it. But yeah, I think it's an interesting concept to be able to use a plate via MIS. A lot of times we do an MIS, we just think about screws, which most of the time screws work just fine. But sometimes you do want the added benefit of a plate construct. And we know plates provide additional rigidity and support to things. So very reasonable concept.
Yeah, for sure.
So if people wanted to check out 15Blades, what's the best way for them to do that? Go to the App Store. You're available on...
Type in 15Blades. We're available on iOS and Google Play.
Okay.
Google Play Store. Just download it. Or you can go to our website, www.15blades.com. There's a QR code there. Scan it. It'll take you directly to either store, depending on your device. You can use your iPad to do it if the screen on your phone is too small for you to read. The iPad is perfect for it. We're going to be developing a web version of it, hopefully soon. Probably not come out till next year.
Sure.
But, when it's out, I think people can just post online instead of using their phone if they really want to do that. Some of the more experienced veterans out there that don't like playing with their phones as much, I think the web version might be for them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm excited to see where it goes. It's definitely growing and more people are hopping on. So if people are interested in 15Blades, download the app, sign up, use your MPI number, get on there and check it out.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the shout out to us.
Thanks for hopping on with me tonight. I think this has been a fantastic talk and getting people excited about 15Blades.
Thanks, Jeff, for inviting me. I think this is great. I really love what you're doing here. And I think you're reaching a lot of people and communicating a lot of pertinent and informative information that I think a lot of your listeners need. And so I appreciate the opportunity to present 15Blades here and, all that.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate
Best
your
luck
time.
To you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Paw Patrol with your host, Dr. Jeff Dykes, joined by Dr. David Lin. We'll see you guys next time.
Disclaimer. Opinions expressed are those of the content creators and do not represent any employer or entity. The information shared is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice or used in any legal capacity, including establishing standards of care. All efforts have been made to comply with HIPAA regulations. No guarantees are made regarding the accuracy of statements or opinions provided. Interaction with the podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Please enjoy this podcast responsibly.